The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruiser finally faded in my rearview mirror as I turned onto my street. Thank God, the charity gala was finally over. It was a success. We'd raised a substantial amount for underprivileged kids, but the endless small talk and forced smiles had drained me. Chris Stevenson, chief of police, pillar of the community. That's the image I had to project. But beneath the crisp uniform and carefully crafted demeanor was just Chris, a man who craved nothing more than peace, quiet, and maybe a cold beer on his back porch. This week had been a relentless barrage of domestic disputes, petty thefts, and one particularly bizarre incident involving a runaway llama and a retirement home. I was running on fumes. I just wanted a weekend to recharge, to forget about the city's problems, and spend quality time with my wife, Sarah. As I approached my driveway, something felt off. A group of figures huddled near Sarah's car, their movements frantic, almost violent. My heart clenched. I accelerated, my headlights cutting through the twilight. As I got closer, the scene slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Sarah's typically pristine SUV was a mangled mess. The windows were shattered, jagged teeth of glass glinting in the dim light. Spray paint, crude and hateful, adorned the side panels, racial slurs that burned my skin just reading them. Pure, unadulterated hate directed at me, at my family. My blood turned to ice. I knew, instantly, who was behind it. Karen's son, Kyle. That entitled, spoiled brat had always harbored a simmering resentment towards me, a palpable disdain that he barely bothered to conceal. I'd seen it in his sneering glances, heard it in his muttered comments whenever our paths crossed at the local grocery store. He was a product of his mother's ingrained prejudice, a walking, talking embodiment of her quiet, insidious racism. I'd always dismissed it as teenage angst, chalking it up to a misguided attempt at rebellion. But this was different. This was malicious, calculated, and deeply personal. He had crossed a line. The adrenaline surged through me, overriding the fatigue and frustration of the past week. I slammed the car into park, the engine still roaring, and threw open the door. The group scattered like cockroaches when the light hits them. I saw Kyle, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and bravado, trying to melt into the shadows with his pathetic group of followers, his hand still clutching a can of black spray paint. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. He'd done this to impress them, to prove his loyalty to some warped, hateful ideology. He had chosen the wrong target, the wrong day, and he was about to learn a very harsh lesson. This wasn't just vandalism. This was a hate crime, and I, Chris Stevenson, the head of this city's police force, was the victim. The fact that he had no clue who I was did not just infuriate me, it was laughable. I was ready to make an example, and he was the perfect candidate. Kyle. My voice boomed, amplified by fury and years of commanding respect. The sound stopped him in his tracks. His head snapped around, recognition dawning in his eyes. The arrogance that usually plastered his face crumbled, replaced by a flicker of genuine panic. He clearly hadn't expected me to be the one to catch him red-handed. He probably thought I was some soft, easily intimidated target. He was tragically mistaken. "Put your hands in the air. You're under arrest for vandalism and hate crimes," I barked, my hand instinctively moving towards my holster. The other kids, a motley crew of bored-looking teenagers, froze, their bravado evaporating in the face of my authority. They were nothing but sheep, easily led astray by Kyle's toxic influence. They were just as guilty, complicit in his act of hatred. "Don't move. Anyone who tries to run will be facing additional charges." Kyle, however, wasn't ready to surrender. He was a spoiled brat who'd never faced any real consequences for his actions. Entitlement dripped from him like sweat. He took a step back, his eyes darting around, searching for an escape route. "You can't arrest me," he stammered, his voice trembling slightly. "My mom knows people. She'll have your job." "Your mother's connections mean nothing here, Kyle," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You committed a crime, and you're going to face the consequences. Now, I'm not going to repeat myself. Hands in the air." He hesitated for a moment, his face contorted with defiance. Then, in a burst of desperate energy, he turned and bolted. He was surprisingly fast, fueled by adrenaline and a lifetime of getting away with bad behavior. But I was faster. Years of training and maintaining peak physical condition kicked in. I sprinted after him, closing the distance with each stride. He wasn't going to escape. I wasn't going to let him. This wasn't just about the damage to my property. It was about sending a message that hate had no place in this city, and that no one, regardless of their privilege or their mother's connections, was above the law. As he weaved through the neighboring lawns, I pulled out my taser. It was a last resort, but Kyle had forced my hand. "Stop! Police! Stop! Or I will tase you!" I yelled. He ignored me, his legs pumping furiously. I took aim, focused, and fired. The probes hit him square in the back. Kyle screamed, a high-pitched, strangled sound that was almost pathetic. He went down hard, his body convulsing uncontrollably. The tired other kids scattered again, their initial shock replaced by outright terror. I immediately moved to his side, holstering the taser. I wasn't about to kick him while he was down, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. "Dispatch, this is Chief Stevenson," I said into my radio, my voice calm and controlled, despite the turmoil raging inside me. "I need backup at my residence. Address. I have one suspect in custody for vandalism and hate crimes, and several others who are potentially involved. Send multiple units." I glanced at Kyle, who was still groaning. On the ground, the effects of the taser slowly wearing off. "Don't move," I told him, my voice firm. "You're only making things worse for yourself." As I waited for backup to arrive, I took a moment to assess the situation. The other kids were huddled together, whispering nervously. They were clearly scared, realizing the gravity of what they had done. They were probably just along for the ride, eager to impress Kyle and be part of his little gang. But ignorance was no excuse. They were accomplices, and they would be held accountable. I walked over, to them, my presence silencing their hushed conversation. "All of you, against the fence. Hands where I can see them," I commanded. They obeyed instantly, their faces pale with fear. I patted them down quickly, making sure they weren't armed. They were just kids, misguided and foolish, but kids nonetheless. The wail of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of my house, their lights flashing, illuminating the scene in an eerie glow. Officers poured out, their faces grim and professional. I briefed them quickly, pointing out Kyle and the other kids. They took over, securing the scene and taking the suspects into custody. As Kyle was being helped into a patrol car, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and regret. "You'll pay for this," he spat, his voice weak but venomous. "My mom will make sure you pay." I just shook my head. He still didn't get it. This wasn't about his mother's influence or my position. This was about him, about his choices, and about the consequences he was facing. He was learning a hard lesson, one that he should have learned a long time ago. As the patrol cars pulled away, I turned my attention back to my house, back to the shattered windows and hateful graffiti. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was tempered by a sense of determination. I wouldn't let this incident define me. I wouldn't let hate win. Just as the last of the patrol cars were leaving, I thought I was finally going to get the chance to take a deep breath. I thought wrong. As I turned to face my house, I saw a group forming in the distance. It was the friends of Kyle, a gaggle of angry teenagers, emboldened by their numbers and fueled by misguided loyalty. They had regrouped and were now marching towards me, their faces contorted with rage. They were shouting obscenities, their words laced with the same hateful rhetoric that had been spray-painted on Sarah's car. "You can't arrest him," one of them yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "He didn't do anything wrong." "Yeah," another chimed in, "he was just having fun." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They actually believed that what Kyle had done was justified, that his hateful act was just a harmless prank. It was a chilling reminder of the insidious nature of prejudice, how easily it could take root and fester in young minds. "Stand down," I commanded, my voice booming across the lawn. "This is an active crime scene. If you don't disperse immediately, you will all be arrested for obstruction of justice." They ignored me, continuing their advance. They were clearly intent on confronting me, on defending their friend, no matter the cost. They were young, foolish, and blinded by their loyalty. But they were also a threat. As they got closer, I could see the anger in their eyes, the potential for violence simmering beneath the surface. They were about to make a very big mistake. Reached for my radio, my fingers trembling slightly. "Dispatch, this is Chief Stevenson again," I said, my voice tight. "I need immediate assistance at my residence. We have a large group of individuals attempting to interfere with an arrest. They are becoming increasingly hostile. Send all available units." Before I could finish, the first rock came hurtling through the air, shattering against the window of my living room. Others followed, raining down on my house like a hailstorm. They were escalating the situation, turning their protest into an act of aggression. They just sealed their fate. With a sigh, I understood it was coming to this. They were going to actively become a threat. I had to protect myself, my property, and my wife, who I knew was inside, terrified. The group surged forward, their numbers overwhelming. I knew I couldn't hold them back on my own. I drew my service weapon, a Glock 17 that had been my trusted companion for years. I hated to do it, but I had no choice. I aimed it in the air and fired a warning shot. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, momentarily silencing the mob. The warning shot had the desired effect, but only momentarily. The teenagers paused, their bravado faltering for a fraction of a second. But then, fueled by adrenaline and a mob mentality, they surged forward again, their shouts growing louder, their actions more reckless. One of them, a burly kid with a shaved head, charged at me, swinging a baseball bat. I dodged the blow, narrowly avoiding a broken arm. I wasn't going to shoot him, not unless I absolutely had to. He was just a kid, albeit a misguided and violent one. But I wasn't going to let him hurt me either. As he swung the bat again, I grabbed it, using my years of training in hand-to-hand combat to disarm him. I wrestled the bat away from him and tossed it aside. He stumbled back, surprised by my strength and agility. But before I could react, another teenager tackled me from behind, knocking me to the ground. I landed hard, the air knocked out of my lungs. The other teenagers swarmed me, kicking and punching. I tried to defend myself, but I was outnumbered. I knew that if I continued to fight, Someone would get seriously hurt, and I didn't want that. I was the chief of police. I was supposed to protect people, not harm them. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the sirens started up again. Backup was finally here. The teenagers, hearing the approaching sirens, panicked and started to scatter. But it was too late. The police cars screeched to a halt, and officers poured out, their weapons drawn. The teenagers were surrounded, their escape routes cut off. They were caught, their little rebellion crushed. The officers quickly secured the scene, arresting the remaining teenagers. I stood up, brushing the dirt and grass off my uniform. I was bruised and battered, but otherwise okay. I surveyed the scene, taking in the chaos and destruction. My house was a mess, my car was ruined, and my neighborhood was in turmoil. All because of one kid's hateful act and his friend's misguided loyalty. I felt a wave of anger wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of resolve. I wouldn't let this incident defeat me. I wouldn't let hate win. I would rebuild my house, repair my car, and restore peace to my community. I was the chief of police, and it was my duty to protect and serve, no matter the cost. The aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. Crime scene investigators swarmed my property, collecting evidence and documenting the damage. Detectives interviewed the arrested teenagers, piecing together the events that had led to this horrific night. My wife, Sarah, emerged from the house, her face pale with shock and fear. I rushed to her side, embracing her tightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. "I'm okay," she said, her voice trembling. "But this is awful. I can't believe this happened." "I know," I said, holding her close. "But we'll get through this. We always do." I spent the rest of the night answering questions, filing reports, and coordinating the investigation. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. But I knew I had to be strong, both for my wife and for my community. I couldn't let this incident shake my resolve or undermine my authority. I was the chief of police, and I had a responsibility to lead. The next morning, the news broke. The local media outlets were all over the story, highlighting the vandalism, the hate crimes, and the arrest of Kyle and his friends. The story quickly went viral, spreading across the internet and sparking outrage and condemnation. The community rallied around me and my family, offering support and solidarity. People sent flowers, cards, and messages of encouragement. They organized a cleanup crew to help repair the damage to my house and my car. They held a vigil in front of my house, demonstrating their commitment to fighting hate and promoting unity. Karen, Kyle's mother, was nowhere to be seen. She probably hiding in shame or lawyering up. Either way, I wasn't concerned about her. My focus was on restoring peace to my community and ensuring that justice was served. Days later, Kyle and his friends were formally charged with multiple felonies, including vandalism, hate crimes, assault, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and they had no chance of escaping conviction. They were sentenced to serve time in juvenile detention and ordered to pay restitution for the damage they had caused. As for Kyle, he was charged as an adult due to the severity of his crimes and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. His life was effectively over, ruined by his hate and his stupidity. The incident had a profound impact on my community. It forced people to confront the issue of racism and to examine their own biases and prejudices. It sparked a dialogue about the importance of tolerance, diversity, and inclusion. And it inspired people to take action, to stand up against hate, and to create a more just and equitable society. In the end, Kyle's hateful act had backfired. Instead of dividing my community, it had brought us closer together. Instead of intimidating me, it had strengthened my resolve. And instead of promoting hate, it had fostered love, understanding, and unity. As the dust settled and life returned to normal, I knew that I had emerged from this ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. I was Chris Stevenson, the Chief of Police, and I was committed to serving and protecting my community, no matter the cost. The weekend may have been ruined, but I had won a much bigger battle.